Cool.
Mhm.
Welcome to episode 137 of an Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm excited to be speaking to Dr. Richard Grossman. Dr. Richard Grossman is an accomplished healer, musician, and author who has dedicated his life to exploring and sharing the deeper dimensions of health, spirituality, and artistic expression. With a career spanning decades, Richard has woven together diverse threads of healing practices from acupuncture to Amazonian plant medicine, each contributing to his holistic approach to well being. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come and speak on the podcast today.
Mhm.
How I love to begin the podcast is for you to share a little bit about your journey. What got you into the work you're now doing, please, Richard?
That's a very good question and probably somewhat complex to answer, like a lot of things. And how did you become who you are? Like in 30 seconds, the elevator version, it's not always easy. Um, but I started my life pretty normal, and around the age of 4 had a pretty severe trauma where I lost the tip of my index finger in a bicycle accident. And had all of the traumas associated with that, the horrible feeling of the mask coming over my face and the gas coming in and the smell of that. And that kind of like created a pattern in my life for many years that was haunting me. And flashbacks, inability to express myself without anger, especially when I was very young. And but it also created a certain, call it sensitivity in me to energy, because I was taken out of normal consciousness very powerfully by that trauma. And discovered early on that I could take an animal, a cat or a dog that didn't like to be touched, and it would let me pet them and be with them. And my whole life kind of like took a big shift when I was about in, well, late primary school, maybe around the fifth grade. I don't know what the equivalent would be over there. But we had a assignment of what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mhm.
What do you want to be when you grow up? Like you ask a 10-year-old that question, you know? So, the whole room went through their normal things like I want to be a doctor, I want to be the lawyer, I want to be a president, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a police officer. And I came up with I want to study the effects of plants on the mind. Which, jaw dropped everybody because nobody had ever heard that before. In fact, I had not heard that before. I don't even know where it came from, but it
Mhm.
was a feeling inside of me. And, that took me on a journey. I studied first, kind of like macrobiotics and the usual hippie and post-hippie diet stuff, fasting, this and that. And then I bumped into Chinese medicine, and that became an obsession for me. And I went to school for that and went to China and practiced there for a while as an intern and came back and started my internship or my practice in California. And that was good until I realized that I still wasn't healed.
Mhm.
And I still was carrying this trauma around. So I started working with medicinal plants, psychedelic plants, call them, and other substances. And that was very helpful. And then the big changing point, the big turning point came when a friend of mine called me up and said he had some ayahuasca from the Amazon and he wanted to work with me with it.
Mhm.
And I said, sure, having never heard of it before. This was 30 something years ago. And it changed my life
Mhm.
like in one night. So that's how I got to be where I am now. And, that's been since then, that's the before and after thing in life. Everybody has a before and after. Sometimes we have many befores and afters. Before and after I grew a beard, all these things are there. And but that was a big before and after because as soon as I did that, I knew that was my work. And I had
Mhm.
to learn as much about it as possible, even though it took me 15 years or so to actually start in-depth studying it because I was a baby acupuncturist who needed to start a practice, who had borrowed money to go through school and had to pay back the money and, all of those details of life. So that's how I got to be who I am now, pretty much. And the other thing that happened was COVID. COVID was a big turning point for me because
Mhm.
I live up in the mountains and there's not a lot to do up here other than to hike and read. And I discovered that as soon as COVID started, I started getting this message from myself that I had to write a book that
Mm.
I could.
Mm.
I went through, I read like probably in the first few months of COVID, probably 20 books. I was just like reading and reading and reading and reading. And then it was like, well, why don't you write? Write,
Mm.
write, write. And then I got insomnia, which was particularly difficult because I was alone. Waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, being alone is no fun. And so I started resisting that and, took melatonin and herbs and all the rest of the stuff. And then one morning I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and it was like, turn your computer on and start your book.
Wow.
And that was my pattern for about a year, was waking up, at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning and writing, and
Mm.
then going back to sleep for an hour, then going hiking, then coming back and writing. And it was intense. It was intense.
Mm.
Yeah, when I finished the book that I wrote, I said to myself, I will never, ever, 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 ever do this again. And now I've started working on two more. So like,
Yeah.
you never take that particular drug again. And it's like, well, where is it? There's a,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Amazing journey. And yeah, that thing about writing a book. It's a bit like I've just finished making a documentary with a film team and a bit about my story, boarding schools and our leaders. And similarly, it was like, yeah, really tough. Obviously, my wife passed just before we premiered it.
Mhm.
But again, it's a bit like you've said, it's like, wow, that was a lot of work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get it out there. What kept you going, Richard, in writing the book?
I was just gonna say it like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But when
Mm.
you take
Mm.
that no step, you have no idea how far 1,000 miles is.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
What kept me going was, I don't know. I don't know. I'd write something, I'd look at it, and I'd say this sucks, and then I'd rewrite it, and it was like, oh, not so bad. And
Mm.
then I discovered um, a couple times in the book, maybe 3 times, I think, I just put in random stories
Mm. Mm. Mm.
that were adaptations from stories I heard when I was younger.
Mm.
And that was like, oh God, I've got some ability to write creatively here, not just tell my own story and my own philosophies. So what kept me going in the beginning was nothing else to do. And towards the end, it was like seeing the finish line
Mm. Mm.
and knowing I just had to take a few more journey steps on that journey of 1,000 miles, which turned out to be another 1,000 miles after that. And
Of course.
it's like, I like I don't have a high degree of patience or discipline
Mhm.
in a lot of things in my life. Natural, I would say innate, right? So in order to accomplish things, I have to work really hard.
Mhm.
And I don't, some people are natural writers or natural musicians. They can just sit down and da 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 da, da, and 20 pages later they yawn and have some coffee and then do another 20 pages. For me, it's like every word was digging out of the depths. None of it came naturally. So I think I'm also stubborn. And what kept me going was just knowing that I told my friends that I was writing a book and I had to finish it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah. I've often heard that with, when you tell someone. that that's your plan, everyone's like, so where is it? What's happening?
Where is it already? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote a book about 10 years ago, maybe it was longer, maybe 14, 15 years ago. And it
Uh,
just sat on my computer because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and it was like, oh, it's not good enough. And I did lots of rewrites. And then COVID hit, similar to you. I got this intuition, oh, the book's How to Survive and Thrive in Challenging Times. And so I sent it to a
nice.
friend. I says, do you think I need to do much more editing? And he says, what do you mean? Just publish it. It's great. And I'm like, really? Oh, I thought I'd have to work on it another 1,000 miles. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
put it out there. So, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting,
Beautiful.
interesting. So, thank you. I'd love for us to segue a little bit into trauma, you know, and just seeing it as a gateway. This idea, kind of a doorway through, rather than just a wound. It's like seeing that as a almost a step through to something greater. I'd love you to talk because, as I mentioned before we began recording, a lot of the people listening have had some form of trauma, whether that is boarding school or childhood trauma or complex PTSD. I'd love
Mm,
to hear what your feeling
yeah.
is.
I'll start by saying trauma sucks.
Mm, mm,
There's no way to rationalize, especially as severe trauma, as being something that is a good thing. However, also, there's no way that I can look at these things and say, well, it's a gift from God or the spirit wanted this or whatever. I don't think so. A world that is that puppet stringy doesn't make any sense to me.
mm,
So on the other hand, trauma creates in a person a need to heal.
mm,
And in my own story, perhaps if that hadn't happened, well, I know I would have ended up being a much different person than I am today. Vastly different. A middle class Los Angeles. I probably, I might have had a really cool life too. I could have gotten into entertainment or into being a lawyer or a doctor or the usual things and had a lot more money than I have today or I might have just been a factory worker. God knows. We don't know what life is going to unveil, and we certainly can't, in retrospect, make assumptions about what life would have been like.
mm,
So, for me, the trauma created that need to heal, and the need to heal created a quest, a hero's journey, so to
mm,
speak. And that hero's journey molded me, and I molded myself. I worked with the energies, molded me into somebody who, for God's sake, I went down to the Amazon for a couple of years and studied, ayahuasca down there. And I've traveled half the world sharing my gifts. And, I wouldn't trade what I have now for anything. So that was the gift. And, the first whole part of this journey might have been something to the effect of being pissed off about it. Like things I couldn't do, just, catch a ball was a challenging thing for me.
mm, mm,
Um, a lot of things were challenging. I tried to learn how to play piano and didn't work very well.
mm,
Um, in retrospect, I could have made it work, but I didn't have the discipline. But I think, the cliche, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it that makes
mm,
all the difference. And the strength that I had to build in myself to push through my own inner stuff, my own inner resistance, my own inner fears, my own inner, something is wrong with you. Because I think everybody who's been through a serious trauma has that idea that something's wrong with them.
mm, mm,
And in a religious society, God was punishing me for something. And I don't know how uncensored you are, but the stuff that comes out of a bull's rear,
mm,
it's ridiculous to
mm,
assume stuff like that. no matter what the cause is, no matter what it is. So what happened, happened. What I do with it is my choice.
Yes.
What I do with it is my choice. And being that it is my choice, I have my hands on the steering wheel or on the tiller or on the ailerons or, whatever it is. I'm in control of what I do with it and how I respond to it, which doesn't mean that shit's not going to still happen.
Mm,
It's still going to happen, but again, every time stuff happens, how do I respond to it?
mm.
Major heartbreak comes along. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And how do I respond to it? Carefully, because I don't want my response to be repression.
Mm,
I don't want to stuff it in a closet. I don't want to put it away. I want to feel what I'm feeling and allow what I'm feeling to mold me into what I am becoming.
mm,
One of my techniques for working with people is if you're hurting, focus on the hurt.
mm,
I think it's now called sensate awareness or somatic experiencing.
mm,
I've been doing it for a long time, working with medicine plants. It's like
mm,
you have this feeling in your heart that hurts.
mm,
Change stations, run away, maybe in an emergency, but can you sit and feel what it is that you're feeling? It's a
mm,
hero's path because this is not easy. It's not a natural thing for us to do that. It's natural for us to want to change stations, run away, find a distraction, you know, have a meal, eat some cookies, smoke a
mm,
doob, whatever it is. That's the natural thing for us to do.
mm,
But what's
mm.
not natural is to feel the pain, to
Yeah.
focus on it as though it's a point of meditation, as though, if you're using a candle to meditate, which is an old technique I think is kind of interesting, silly maybe. But if you're using a candle to meditate, you focus everything you have on that candle. If you have that feeling inside that is not healing, what happens if you just sit, fold your hands, close your eyes, and put your attention there for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour?
Mm,
It changes. It may not heal it yet,
mm.
but I think it was John Gray that came up with the saying, "What you resist persists." It may not have been
Yeah.
John Gray. That's probably a lot older. And so this is the art of total non-resistance, the opposite of resistance.
Mm, mm,
It's walking into the face of the storm and saying, "Here I am.
mm. What you
Here I
resist,
am."
persist. It's interesting as you say that. I remember I'd I arrived in a Buddhist monastery age 26, and as I
Where was
started to
that?
meditate,
Where
where
was that?
it was a
Yeah.
Thai forest monastery, but it was based in the UK in the northeast.
Okay.
So it was just a small community. There was about 10 up to 15 people living there at times. And I was just a novice. I say just a novice, it was hard work. I
Mm.
have to say, it was very difficult. People say, "Oh, I was really lucky." I'm like, well, I'd been struggling with drink and drugs, so to suddenly go without that, and obviously I'd had quite a lot of childhood trauma as a child. And arriving there, I did that. I focused on the pain, and I hadn't realized, but my heart was in a lot of pain, actual physical pain. It was like this
Mm.
burn, not necessarily burning, but like a shooting sensation. And as I sat and I meditated, it was like, because I was so dissociated, I hadn't realized it was like that shutting down of feeling. And it was a number of months later that I started to work with my dreams and the unconscious. I started to cry, and the pain in the
Oh,
heart started
beautiful.
to go. And that was so, yeah, as you speak that, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember that pain in my heart. It was so profound. It's like, I just hadn't realized because I was just busy, busy, busy working in London in the
Mm.
financial sector. It's like, and so, yeah. That's great. And I kind of, as you say, it's that this idea of approaching rather than avoiding. I always avoided with whatever way, drink, drugs, prostitutes. It's like whatever way of dealing with the pain. And actually, if I can just approach and feel into gently, this is what I feel, that it's almost like the flower starts to unfold and the beauty comes
Beautiful,
forth. Mm,
beautiful,
mm,
beautiful.
thank you, Richard. So I guess a question I have is fascinated by your journey to the Amazon. So you spent several years studying down there. You know, how was that experience?
I had almost because I knew I wanted to do this like when I was 18. And again, I didn't know what it was I wanted to do. I just wanted to go south. I wanted to go to the jungle. And I knew there was something there. And the side trip was many years that I didn't do that. I spent time in an ashram. I did a lot of different things during that time period. And when it finally came time for me to go, I had had the experience with ayahuasca and a few other things had happened where I went to Mexico and lived in Mexico, got married to a woman from the United States and left Mexico to go live with a Mexican who was illegal in the United States. And uh, at some point, we started working with ayahuasca with a couple other friends of mine, people that I worked with. And as soon as I took it again, I knew that the call was there.
Mm,
And I didn't really want to listen to it, but I knew it was there. The universe kind of forced it on me because we got divorced and it was traumatic and oh boy, it hurt, and a lot of things happened, business failure. Um, and then one day I heard I was online learning about ayahuasca some more, just in one of the bulletin boards, they called them back then.
mm,
And I saw that there was going to be a conference in Peru in Iquitos.
mm.
And so I wrote the guy who was putting it on and said, well, I'd like to attend. Can you send me some information? And a few hours later, I got a letter from him, an email from him that says, sure, and send me a syllabus of what you want to speak on. Oh, me, yeah, no. Um, so I had been working with some sound work, and some mushroom work prior to that and meditation, getting people on sound journeys. And so I put together something about how sound and ayahuasca work together, and it was like good enough to get me on stage for 20 minutes and uh, get me hooked on being in the Amazon.
Mm,
And a couple days into it, I found myself sitting in a maloka, they call it the ceremonial structures, with about 60 other crazy Northerners. I won't call them Westerners because we're really not Westerners, we're Northerners.
mm.
I think England would be Northeasterners from the Amazon. Um, and it was bedlam. It was absolute bedlam. And in one corner was somebody going wee 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 wee. And another corner somebody's going, I will now transmit the messages from the 27th Gondorian dimension to you. And another one was going, stop it, just get your hands off me. And all going on at once and people screaming and yelling. And I'm sitting there in a pretty calm place going, I do not like this at all. And the shaman wasn't doing much. He just sang, and let people go nuts. So I think one of the big turning points in my life was when I pulled out a little portable didgeridoo I was carrying with me and started blasting the maloka with the didgeridoo. And in about 2 minutes, there was stillness.
Mm,
And about 2 hours later, um, there's something going on here you have to explore more of.
mm, mm,
So I spent, not 2 years solid, but probably over the course of 5 years, 2 years total, going down, coming back, making money, going down, coming back, making money, going down, spending all my money, coming back and making money, and studied with several different shamans down there, curanderos, as they call themselves.
mm,
And at one point, one of them said, why don't you lead the next ceremony?
mm, mm,
And I did. Nobody died. I was happy. Um, and that started me on my path that I'm on today, still
mm,
on.
Thank
But
you.
what I brought into it, I think pretty early on was a lot of music, jaw harps and flutes and things. One place I went to, I played a jaw harp there, and I came back, a few months later, and one of the younger healers there had carved a jaw harp out of wood and was playing it. It was sweet. I mean, so sweet.
Wow.
And this was 30 something years, not 20. This was like 20 years ago. And,
Mm,
I got kind of famous for being a bit annoying with all the music that I played, but appreciated still. You
mm,
know, a story, one of my shortest term and most beloved of teachers was a woman named Norma, and she's gone now, so you can use her name.
mm,
And Norma invited me, had heard me on stage at one of these conferences, and she invited me to come to her Maloka as a guest and
mm,
as a guest musician because she wanted to hear what I did, more closely. So this whole story is in my book, and it's really funny because it involves diarrhea, it involves eating bad food, and it's like a whole thing. But anyway, this all like comes up to me being in the Maloka and her leading the ceremony, and a few moments later, well, a little bit into the ceremony, I hear she makes the sound whoa, 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 like that. And I'm like, what's she doing? But she kept on like, whoa, 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 whoa. And somebody came over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, she wants you to play your didgeridoo. It was so sweet. I thought it was so sweet. And so I played the didgeridoo and there was complete silence. And then I pulled out a jaw harp, a little, it was a Siberian
mm,
komus, and just wailed on the thing, just totally uncensored, totally not holding back. And when I was done, there was just total silence. And me being me, I'm thinking, did I just drive all of these people totally insane? And are they going to hate me forever now? Because it was out there. It was totally out there for ayahuasca. Two and three different melodies going at once, and it was wild. I don't even know how I did it. I can't replicate it.
mm,
And then after a few moments of silence, maybe some minutes of silence, I hear, gracias, maestro. Toca más, gracias, maestro. Thank you, teacher. Play more, teacher.
mm,
And it was the first time anybody had called me maestro, and this coming from Norma was really significant to me
mm, mm,
because she was a rebel and respected and scorned and a woman in a man's world, somebody I really loved and respected a lot, even though I only knew her for a short period of time.
mm, mm,
And that was the Amazon, being attacked by mosquitoes and walking down a trail and being face to face with a snake that if it had bitten me, I would have been dead in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and exciting place.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Uh,
Thank you. Fascinating. And that effect of music, I think, it's almost like since tribal times, millions of years, it's like we've always sat around a fire and played music or made sounds. And just see how much of an impact music's really had and the difference as well, when it is like a natural sound, like the didgeridoo or guitar. And I did hear someone speak, maybe it was a friend I was speaking to, maybe a colleague, about the the Amazonian people just being really appreciative to the Spanish, not for many things, but one of the things was bringing the guitar into the space. That someone made that reflection a few days ago, and I'm like, oh, hadn't thought of that, and just bringing that music and that, I obviously use music a lot, just personally, to survive the trauma I went through as a child was to write and to sing. And it was my way of transmuting. I was very quiet. I couldn't really talk, but then I could sing. And, since my wife's died, I've done a lot of singing and writing songs and just getting back to the music. And I find it, especially in a group, if we can get everyone's voices together, whether that's a kirtan, the call and response of the Indian traditions. A friend of mine went to a kirtan last night and she was saying just how amazing it was. And, it's like, yeah, the power of music and sound and singing.
It's one of the things that differentiates us as humans, I believe. Some cynical people say, well, why should human beings continue to exist? Look at the mess we're making.
Mm.
And my response is always look at the music,
Mm.
look at the art, look at the beauty that human beings, these kind of funny apes, maybe not yet finished evolving, have created.
Mm.
And pizza, and of course. Yeah.
Pizza. Yeah, yeah. I used to love pizza. I've gone gluten free recently or keto,
Um,
so I don't have as much pizza. But someone asked me on one of these um, banking sites, for your mystery question, and I said, they asked me, what's your favorite food? And I said, pizza. So it's still out there in the
nice.
ethers somewhere. So yeah, pizza. Um, thank you, thank you. So I guess, I'd love for us to dive in a little bit about trauma and ayahuasca, plant medicine. Gabor Mate, who we interviewed for our documentary, Boarding on Insanity. I know that he's been down to South America. He's spoken on a lot of conferences about plant medicine, and I'd love you to just maybe share some of your feelings around that, having been through trauma as a child, and then that was the gateway to help you to start healing your trauma.
You know, a little story is some time ago I went to Hawaii to Kauai. I
Mm,
needed a break. I needed to take some times off. It was pre-COVID time. And I stayed at a friend's house who had a beautiful traditional Hawaiian cabin at the north end of Kauai, best place, and oof, beautiful. And her house was impeccable.
mm,
Like the forks were stacked one on top of the other. The doodads on the cabinets were placed with golden mean measurements, like perfection. And I'm not, I'm not. But anyway, I spent a week there and tried to keep everything where she left it. And finally, it came the day for me to leave. And one more walk on the beach, and I'm walking on the beach, and I'm like almost weeping because I didn't want to leave.
mm,
And I hit my toe on a rock, on a piece of coral rock, and cut my big toe open. So I'm limping back to the house, and I get there, and she says, I ask her if she has a Band-Aid, or some tape or whatever, so I could fix it up. And she said, I think so, and goes over into the hallway in this house, and there's a locked cabinet there, almost a meter and a half tall cabinet, 6 feet tall cabinet, and locked, and she unlocks it and opens it up, and there is total bedlam in that closet. The exact opposite of the house. And, luckily it didn't all come cascading out, but it certainly could have. And that's trauma, for
Mm,
most people is, we might fix our house up really nicely, wear the right clothes, say the right words, go to the right parties, if we're high level functioning through it or not, if we're not high level functioning. But, that closet is where all of the trauma gets stuffed and put away and then locked. And, on the old fashioned maps, the old school maps, there would be like blah, 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 blah. And they would say, there be dragons.
mm,
There be dragons, matey. you know, and it's like, it's the unknown. And that closet is the there be dragons,
mm,
the place where we don't want to go. We don't want to go there. And of course not, because going there is painful and it seems insurmountable and it seems impossible. And it seems like if I go there, it's just going to make things worse. And so with plant medicine, ayahuasca, mushrooms, also many years of psychotherapy, possibly, but that closet can get unpacked.
mm, mm,
Doesn't have to be dramatic. One of my little cliche sayings is dramatic healing doesn't need to be dramatic because I think the gentle approach is best. The approach of like, let's feel into this.
mm,
Ayahuasca certainly will accelerate that because it's anything but gentle. And it's
mm,
for people who are willing to really dive deep. And what they don't tell you is in that closet, there's a box
mm,
hidden way in the back, and it has a combination lock on it. And you have to figure out the combination to that box. And then when you finally open that box up, I think I call it a safe in the book, but when you finally open that safe up, what's there is the worst thing you could possibly imagine. The thing you didn't want to see, the repressed of the repressed. And facing that, because you've already had the practice of discovering that the box is there, allows that root trauma to be discharged. Peter Levine has the theory that that root trauma will cause a person to seek out similar traumas throughout their life
mm,
until they heal that root trauma.
mm,
And so ayahuasca, I think, is a powerful way to do that in a relatively painless and a relatively rapid way if a person's willing to do the work, not in one ceremony, maybe not in five ceremonies, usually around 10 ceremonies, we're really getting there. But they're willing to do the work to, the title of my book is Trust and Forgive, the
mm,
medicine of your life.
mm,
To trust your life, to trust the experiences of your life, to trust what's happened to you as not being punishment, as not being judgment, as not being karma. It may be all those things, but it's really not because those are human constructs,
mm,
but to trust and go to the place where those primal wounds are and forgive,
mm,
which is not making anybody involved with any of the perpetrators of that trauma or the situation okay. You're not
mm.
forgiving them, right? Because some things are unforgivable.
Yeah.
You know, they don't deserve to be forgiven. But what I'm forgiving, when I had this realization about what forgiveness was, it was in a medicine ceremony that's also in my book, powerful experience. And the trusting and forgiveness meant that I had to release that place inside of me that was traumatized. I had to like open the metaphorical clenched fists in my heart
Mm.
that didn't want to let go because through letting go, I had to see it, I had to feel it, I had to, accept it on such a deep level that I was no longer holding on to it. My heart opened, my hands opened, and I was free,
Mm.
er,
Yeah.
freer
Yeah. Yeah.
of that experience, of that trauma.
Mm.
It's if what a person resists or hides from or runs from is what persists, this is the opposite of that. What you
Mm.
can love into forgiveness, because forgiveness is a very loving action. It's probably the most loving action because it involves allowing yourself to be totally open to being exactly who you are with no shields, no walls, no resistance inside, not for anybody else, for yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And that's scary because the trauma creates an identity that is something that can be held on to,
Mm.
and it's in the trauma, the identity is safe because it's familiar.
Yeah. And
Self-identity.
it's like it's safe. I can remember that having that realization in the monastery that I was kind of holding on to that pain because it was familiar and it was just like not necessarily I didn't like it, but it was just I was just used to it. It was like you say, an identity. And it was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I'm doing this to myself. I was like, oh, which was really good flip for me because it took me from victim. Because I think I remember in my teens screaming up at the sky, at God, what was happening to me, and that question, why me? But that really kept me in that victim. I was stuck there. And it's only when I've learnt to ask better questions
Yeah.
and I've flipped out of that into more creator. Um, but thank you. That I find that very inspiring as well, what you've said about like the opening, that forgiveness. Um, I had an experience when I was in the monastery. I was really struggling, self-harming, tried to commit suicide. It was very messy for a number of years.
Mm,
And I got to a point where I was trying to control everything. I've noticed that with a lot of people coming out of boarding school, myself including, because it was such a controlled environment. So, kind of like this, I was trying to control everything around me, and it was
mm,
exhausting. And I got to an insight of I let go of getting my own way. And as soon as I did that, it's like you said about the fists, it was like, oh my God, that feels lovely. Suddenly I can let
mm,
go. And it was like suddenly bliss. It was like I didn't have to be angry at people for weeks because that's
mm.
what you do. It's like, no, I can just let go. It was very, very
Yeah.
cathartic. So thank you. Forgiveness.
It's a beautiful Sufi song that the words are non-resistance is a treasure
Mm, mm,
in the
mm,
lover's innermost center. Only
mm.
the heart can see this. Only the heart can see it. Only the
Yeah.
heart can see,
Yeah.
so non-resistance is such an amazing place. And,
Mm,
just to clarify, I'm not talking about in the external world because there are times where resistance and fighting and,
mm,
is important as a
mm,
life-saving situation. I'm talking about in the inner world. So, non-resistance is allowing the heart to be the heart to be open.
mm, mm,
And more than the end of the journey, that's the beginning of the journey. That's like
mm,
the point where everything has the possibility of shifting. Because when we go through that core place inside
mm,
and allow the heart to open,
mm,
be the love, allow that to happen, then the journey into the mysticism begins.
mm,
Mysticism, mystical experience. I don't like that word.
mm,
Just call it love, pure love within. It's
mm,
easier, but it has some baggage too. That term has baggage too.
mm,
But, then comes the possibility of going from healing, the healing journey,
mm,
to the journey of how amazing can life be as a healed person?
mm,
How much can the heart open up? How much love is it possible to experience, not for anything or anybody, but just the core of our existence, the core of our life, the core of who and what we really are is pure love, infinite, timeless, outside of time and space.
yeah.
That then becomes the possibility that healing the trauma opens up. And here's the difference, too, because I could certainly go on that spiritual journey as a traumatized person.
Mm,
The possibility exists, though, and it's still a good thing to do, even if this possibility is there, that I'm again using that spirituality to avoid
mm,
healing the trauma.
mm,
So this is all, and everything happens all at once anyway when you're
mm,
doing this kind of work, because I can both be, the young boy who was traumatized, the adult who had his mind blown from ayahuasca,
mm,
and the person sitting here with you today who, is really, I think we're both pretty cool beings that have utilized our trauma to create beauty in the world.
mm, mm,
And we go back to the original question is, how do you live with trauma? What do you do with trauma? We're creating beauty with the effects of what we've been through.
mm.
Mm. And I think
Y-
that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost like, thank you. It's great. It's like I interviewed a friend a number of years ago, and he said almost there's three stages to that trauma. And it's almost like the hero's journey you said with Joseph Campbell. That third stage, you return with the boon, you return with your gold. And once you go through that traumatic journey, it's like you can then serve others, you can then give to others.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful. It's like I was listening to Tom Rath, one of his books today, and he's saying it's like asking the question, how can I contribute? And often when we have that wound, we have something great to contribute because we have experiences like no other. And
Yeah.
people can resonate so deeply when we share our stories. They're like, especially for a lot of the audience here is like ex-boarders. We don't share our stories because we were shamed for speaking up. We were told, don't talk, that you don't grass. So we think we're all alone. So when we hear other people's stories, when we share our own stories, suddenly it becomes golden because you're really contributing so much to society.
Mm. Beautiful.
Mm. Thank you, thank you. I'm aware we're kind of coming towards the end of today's interview. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. It's been a real pleasure and a kind of a flowing. Is there anything you'd love to share with my audience, which has bubbled up as we're speaking, which is like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I really need to share this.
Yeah, I always, I like to end some things like this with kind of like a message to people that if you feel it's hopeless, it's not. If you feel you can't heal, you can. If you feel life doesn't have any meaning, it will. It can and it does. And if you think I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that there is a sense of we're on a journey, we're evolving. We're on I think it's an infinite journey or journey into the infinite. And so there is no place where it's as good as it gets. There's always
Mm,
room for more and better and sweeter. And and so, be brave, be
mm,
bold. When I was in China studying acupuncture, I had this very intense looking guy come in who had just had a stroke. And I was in clinic. I was a baby acupuncturist. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was fortunate to work under somebody who had many, many, many years of experience. And I'm supposed to like put the needles into his fingertips, right?
mm,
So, not a good idea for me as somebody who has hand trauma,
mm, mm.
and not a good idea for me as a baby acupuncturist because I know that's going to really hurt him. So I'm holding his hand with the needle in my hand and I'm like shaking a little bit. And he looks at me and says, "Be bold." Never spoke another word of English. Be bold. And, damn, 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 got it all in. And so be bold.
Mm, mm,
Be bold. If you think you can't do it, do it. If you think you can't heal, heal. There's nobody that's hopeless. And it may take some time to get to the place of finding the right path,
mm.
but you will. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I
Thank
would say to your audience
you. Yeah,
and to
oh,
my and to
bless.
myself.
And to me, yeah, I certainly felt hopeless at times in my
Yeah.
20s, and yeah, I had the support of the monastics around me, which helped me keep
Mm.
going. Otherwise, I would have, given up.
How
So,
beautiful.
yeah, blessings. Well, bless you for your work. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. And yeah, how do people find out more about you? Where's the best place to connect to you, Richard?
The ancient Egyptian uh, story cosmology is when a person dies, they go to Osiris, who takes out their heart
Mm,
and puts it on the scale of Ma'at,
mm,
puts your heart on one side and a feather on the other. And if your heart weighs more than the feather, you don't get to go on to the next realms. If your heart is lighter than a feather, you get to go on to the next realms. So my website is heartfeather.com,
Heartfeather.com. That's a
feather.com.
beautiful story.
Yeah,
Heartfeather.
and my book is for sale. Trust and Forgive, The Medicine of Your Life is for sale on Amazon
Mm, mm,
worldwide. So
mm,
digital and paper. And
great.
it's a journey. It's a journey to read that book.
Mm.
Yeah,
Thank you. So I'll put a description in the description. I'll put in the website heartfeather.com and Trust and Forgive. I will put that a link to the Amazon where people can buy it. But
great. Thank you.
yeah, I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and if I can support your work in any way, please do let me know.
Likewise, this has been amazing.
Oh, bless you, Richard.
Yeah,
Okay, take care.
thank you.
Bye bye.